The content of this podcast is produced for entertainment purposes only and is for informational and educational use. It does not constitute financial or investment advice. You should not make any financial decisions based on the information provided without consulting a qualified professional. All opinions expressed are solely those of the host and guests and do not reflect the views of any company or organization. The hosts and/or guests may currently own, have previously owned, or intend to own securities discussed in the content. The content produced here belongs to Daniel Andreev of 18 Degree Journal and cannot be reproduced or used without prior permission. We do not wish for this content to be used for AI training and do not give such permissions. Hey everybody. So first of all, Happy New Year. I know it's a little late. I think it's just turned January 11th. So a little bit, better late than never. But I do want to wish all of you a Happy New Year, filled with health, happiness, and fantastic memories. We're changing the format a little bit in how I'm communicating with you. I found out that I feel more personalized if I kind of wing it when I record it. So instead of just reading what I wrote, I'm going to try to speak from the heart if I remember. It's not going to be as, robust and as flowing as it would have been if I just read what I wrote. But I feel this way that you can get one kind of content if I'm speaking to you, one kind of content if you were to read the article. So as always, you can check out the Substack for the full article. I'll have the information, maybe a few graphs. In this case, no such case, it's a very mini update, but on the other, you'll get maybe an interactive forum this way where we can just chat and get a summary. So I hope you really enjoyed our last week's special guest. So special thanks again to Whit Hugley. It was a pleasure having him on the show, and we hope to see him again someday. I'm for one, I'm very excited to see how he progresses and how he goes from here. We do have a few more guests up in the pipeline, but as a rule of thumb, don't expect too many of them to come here and there. The goal is to invite people only that I've had a chance to look through all the writings, look through their public appearances, to get really to know them and try to nudge them to a direction where I know they haven't answered or gone before. Of course, we're never going to be successful, especially sometimes when we have the first time we have a guest over. He might have a story to tell, he wants to introduce himself, and we're going to let that flow naturally, but the goal is always to nudge them to try to learn something that I haven't learned before, especially after studying them. And perhaps in this way we can expand the database of what is known in the investment universe and push the field forward in a way. This way, not only I benefit, but somebody else who's read a lot about him or interested in a certain topic, maybe here we'll be able to touch on that. So that is the goal, that is the hope. Whether we achieve this or not, it seems to be seen. But we can hope, right? So now to the topic. One thing I do want to mention that another reason why the pipeline is going to be a little slowed down is due to my own mistakes. The way I initially set this all up, I made some political errors, and of course, just to be completely transparent, everybody who's been invited to the show who has recorded or has not been published knows about my mistakes, especially since I found out. I try to be pretty transparent to them and take responsibility for it. Anyone who's shown up or will show up has acknowledged that we're a growing platform, we're making mistakes, we're growing to grow, but just so you're aware of what's happening. So now to the topic at hand. As you see by the topic of the video, this is a small update for the lumber background we've written earlier a couple weeks ago. We focused on that work on a lot of topics that we're going to just enhance today. So if you haven't checked it out, I do recommend to check it out. If you just want to get a shortcut what you need to focus on, there's two sections. So it's called the rundown on prices and the current news section. And even though I did a crash course there, it gives a little more background and feeling into what exactly we tried to cover. Not to cover, sorry. I'm a little rambling. It's my first time recording here without the script, so forgive me. But more on the details of the taxes and how they affect the current companies we're studying. I'll give you a little more detail in a second, but it will help you to understand this better if you have already read or listened to that section, so please do so. And the current video, even though we're already rambling and dragging it on, is meant to be very short, and it's a little update, so without further ado, let's get into it. So last time we talked a lot about this reserve cash and how duties work between Canada and the States when looking at lumber mills. A lot of these companies have, we'll call it secret assets or non-misunderstood assets on their balance sheet, and it stems from the duties they owe to the United States. Sometimes they renegotiate deals and they get it back. Sometimes they can resell those assets to investors at a discount, and that way they have certainty in their cash flows. However, over the past, we'll call it year or so, Canada's sawmill companies have seen an increase in their duties they owe. They're currently facing anywhere from 30 to 60% in duties. This depends company to company, and of course, this approximate numbers. As you can imagine, when you need to pay such huge margins on getting away your product, a lot of companies are under stress. But there's a small caveat to this that makes it even more complex, and to those that are interested in these opportunities, it's something that they need to know. So one of the duties or effect or legislations that comes in effect is we'll call it backward taxes on 3 years of their duties that they need to now push up their cash raise reserves, and if they don't, they have to put it with interest. So this is additional collateral that they have to post onto this liability of duties. I'm just simplifying the wording. And companies that out of nowhere, you have compressed lumber prices, you have some, we'll call it non-supply chain shakeups into how you can get your product to the States, because even today, most of the product still ends up in the States. I think it's around 87% from Canada. And not only do you have additional tariffs to pay, but you have to pay backward taxes where you're now hugely cash constrained. So I'll read an excerpt of what I wrote, just so it flows a little better. So what has been changing, affecting that I haven't mentioned? Well, as bad as the taxes and duties have been, it looks even worse on the surface. As mentioned in the previous explanation, many Canadian sawmills are facing 30 to 60% duties when shipping lumber to the United States. By itself, this is a significant burden on companies. However, it has become apparent that the administration has insisted that the duties has been affected by the exports for the last 3 years. This means, on top of ongoing high tariffs, the real pain comes from retroactive adjustments in the U.S. Department of Commerce Administration reviews. For example, final results with the 6th review covering 2023, this was, I think, around October 2025, higher rates applied retroactively to exports shipped last year. Companies must post additional cash deposits or face true-up bills with interest, while earlier deposits are tied up. So this has drained liquidity really quickly. And even though a lot of these companies are asset rich, they're now cash constrained. And in any crisis, as you know, cash is king. And if you can't make your payment, you will default no matter how much your assets are actually worth. And looking at especially smaller companies in Canada, this has been like a perfect storm, You have higher tariffs, you have backward taxes, cash constraints, hard to get loans. Interest rates they are coming down, but the risk is coming up, so the risk premium for the loans they're paying sometimes goes up. The government has made an effort to give, I think it was $700 million in the beginning of the years of loan guarantees, and they then upped it up to $500 million. So it's about it's about $1.2 billion for aim to restructure their companies and to add liquidity. However, uptake has been slow, and critics in the United States are already applying pressure, saying that this is another form of subsidies, which you can make your own conclusions. So for larger firms that have more cash, that have a better line of credit, that don't need to refinance their debt as earlier, it's not as big of an issue. But for smaller players, especially when lumber prices are remaining very depressed and they can't make a profit and they can't even slow down a mill to wait for prices to go up to then up ramp production, this is the perfect squeeze. And whether they survive or not is meant to be seen. Whether we're going to have more industry consolidation, or maybe we're going to have a few years of firms failing, better companies collecting better assets, accumulating better assets, and coming out of this storm just powerhouses. So it's very interesting. I think that it is definitely a place not to be overlooked, and I'm trying to find something that can be of interest. I'm writing about 2 or 3 companies, still comparing what I think is better and what makes more sense. But when I'm looking at these companies, there's a few questions I'm trying to answer, and they are they able to survive this cash crunch at the moment? Is their business model or size beneficial or harder for the times ahead? What flexibility do they have in the current status quo? How dependent on reports on exports versus internal sales? Do they have operational leverage to lower production and take advantage of the industry downturn, or double down for other end of the cycle? And the last one that I kind of been thinking about is earlier this year we studied Giverny Capital, and one of the letters, the author has made the statement that cyclicals are usually a bad business to be in. And I'm thinking about this, but I'm also remembering that I've studied enough fund managers at this point. A lot of the times, even if they're a bad business, if you buy them at a very good price, you can still end up really okay. So we're thinking about this. We'll see where this go. And to summarize everything we've written and to minimize all my rambling, I'll just end it up exactly how I've written it. So the industry continues to face structural challenges. Canadian mills are still primarily exporting to the United States. So recent data of 2025 is showing approximately 87% of exports is heading south, leaving them vulnerable to U.S. demand and policy shifts. Mill closures and curtailment have accelerated since 2022, with more indefinite ones in late 2025, early 2026 from major players, reflecting pressure that potentially creating capacity, discipline, and opportunities for surviving with scale and flexibility. New harvest limits and persistently low prices continue to squeeze the smaller operators hardest, and it seems like only larger players will benefit. Keep an eye out on this, and I'll keep you updated. Again, there's a letter coming out, not a letter, there's a write-up on the company coming out, and even though I rambled a lot in this new format, thanks for sticking with me. We'll try to keep it short and sweet for future videos. I maybe play this a little better. Again, I'm not really an expert on the lumber industry. I'm just an enthusiast who's gotten into it and got interested in a few companies. So I'm going down rabbit holes trying to understand them. If you have an insight, anything I'm missing or you think will be beneficial that I could share or even to reflect on myself, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, cheers. Hope you all have a great day.